We're going to recommence the Environment Committee meeting, and we had left our officers to go away and have a conversation around fee charges for subdivisions. Mandy or Claire, have you got some comments as a result of the Mayor's questions?
So, thank you, Madam Chair. I won't use the word that I just used with you, because that would be rude. So, in essence, the issue that's been raised is whether jumping from a deposit from 2,000 to 5,000 is too much for council at this point in time. There could be somewhere that you might have a conversation where you arrive at somewhere in between those amounts, and if you were going to pick a number, it might be 3,000. But before we get to that kind of state, I just want to say three things, which is the 5,000 amount was at the lower end of the actual costs that Mandy has worked out for those 4-lot subdivision plus developments. Yeah. That regardless of what number we pay as they pay as a deposit, we will still on-charge them the actual cost of processing the consent. So it just means that they'll be doing it as additional costs that get recovered later. The two things that I just want to note in that is that we will improve our information on the website. I think that was a very good suggestion around making sure that developers and applicants know what the deposits are, but also what to expect in that process, and we'll also make sure that the duty planners that advise people that come in through the counter are also having those conversations with developers, because I think that's important. The cost estimate preparation, so we'll promote that as an option for people, is not cost recoverable, so you just need to be aware that in doing that piece of work we will not be able to recover the cost of actually preparing that cost estimate, so there'll be additional hours on Mandy's team to be doing those across the applications. And the other one is around the section 357 objection process, which the Mayor raised, and the costs of that objection process are also not cost recoverable. So if somebody objects to the costs, there's a process that has to be gone through, and there's staff time involved in that, and those costs are not recoverable either. So those are two things you just need to factor into the mix. So in essence, as officers, we've given you advice around the 5,000, but we're still equally comfortable that anywhere between 2 and 5, we're still going to be on charging the actual costs to the developer. Mandy, did you have anything else you want to add?
Councillor Edgar.
Sorry, I just had a point of clarification, or a question of clarification, just around the estimate. So I don't think that was canvassed in the report at all. So I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about what the proposal is there, just because it isn't covered in the report at all, and it does feel a little bit like a length of string, because you never know what extra information may be requested, and which is also our time frame issue as well. And so I'm just wondering if by providing the estimate we actually then risk increasing the chance of people appealing the costs as well. So can you just talk us through that estimate? And I wouldn't mind hearing some advantages and disadvantages. And
yes, so through the chair, under the RMA as it currently is, there is a provision for applicants to request from the territorial authorities an estimate of their costs for the applications. And if that happens, we'll certainly do so. It doesn't happen very often at the moment, and we're not promoting it. So the suggestion was that we make people aware that that is an option, more aware that they can do that. But yes, I guess the pros are there's less there's less bad surprises, if you like, for people going through the application process. But the cons are it does require more staff time to work that out, but also keep on top of that and update that as things progress through the resource consent processing, because as you pointed out, unknown things can happen and extend the time and extend the costs. Yeah. Okay. So, Mayor Rachel.
So I would want to change that, the subdivision charge. I just want to question around that. I had a quick look at TDC's website, and I think they charge $1,500 for a subdivision regardless of size. I just want to make sure, is the officers aware of if there's any dialogue about whether that's going to change significantly?
Through the chair, I've just had dialogue about what their charge out rate will be, which is proposed to be 160. I didn't go into detail about any other deposits.
Right. Is there any particular reason why we would differentiate between subdivision lots 1 to 3 and 4+ lots and not just have a single charge?
So through the chair, the 1 to 3 lots generally capture the mum and dad developers, should I say, so and also boundary adjustments. So these are, so that's the differentiation is the average costs for those smaller subdivisions are lower than the 4+ lots.
All right, so I'm going to put some arbitrary figures, and I'm going to do that because I genuinely do believe that if we are trying to encourage housing development, that actually we need to be sending all the signals that say we're doing that, and that means this isn't losing money. This isn't saying the ratepayers are going to absorb any more. It just means that they come in the door and start the process exercise comes at an initial deposit stage, and I think this is where some of the language in this needs to be reflected in deposits as opposed to charges, because that's, to me, the way it's written is I would come in and go, well, this is what I'm going to be charged. So when I just see that, I think there's a bit of language that needs to be thought about, because it is a deposit. So you're coming in and this is your initial, just with that in the table where it says at the start under the title, but when you get to the column that says charge, that we might be better to just put /deposit, just so that that's really clear. That in some cases it's a one-off charge, in other cases it's a deposit, or it's a charge for hourly rates. So it's a real mixture in that column when I look throughout it, but that's a minor change that I think can be dealt with outside of this meeting. You've got that clause, I presume, somewhere in there. Do we have that? Minor editorials can be sorted out. I'd like to think we do in the recommendation. So can I just propose that we move for both of those, that the initial deposit amount is $1,500 for 1s to 3s and moves to $2,500 for 4+ lots, and that we make sure that we are communicating very well that this is a deposit, is the start of a process, and there are additional fees that will flow from that. And I think there needs to be a good tension in the system around that to make sure that we are, at every step, making sure that we are enabling people to navigate, helping people navigate the plan when we go through this process, that we're able to transparently, demonstrate where the charges are required, and that we continue a process of invoicing through to obtain that money. If this was to create a problem, or what you find, we end up with a lot of defaults, a lot of Section 357 objections that were unfounded, then I think we can review it. But my understanding is that this council, I think I've done 2 in the last, maybe 3 in the last 6 years of 357 objections that have got through to hearing panel level. I don't think it's a particularly common occurrence, and there's nothing in this report that tells me that it is. So that makes me think that most people, they look at what they're charged, they accept that they are the charges, and we get on and we deal with it. Because if that wasn't the case, I'd expect there to be some commentary in the report that this is a real issue for the officers. So with that proviso of just checking that, have we got a large amount of time being dealt with in terms of cost objections, down to actual 357 objections?
So through the chair, not the formal 357 objections, there are a lot of queries. into the nature of the bill. So it's clear to me that the expectations are, for a lot of applicants, that the initial charge out rate is there or thereabouts the final cost of what they expected to pay.
All right,
So,
okay.
but not formal 357 objections. We normally work it out with the applicant before.
All right. So in that case, we need to we need to put some effort into really good communication about the process, because if what we're told is these will be, most likely they get additional charges on top of these anyway, it doesn't really matter in some ways where the starting point, as long as it's a reasonable proposition to start. And I'm going to go, well, you set some fees last time. I haven't got anything to suggest to me that I need to change those absolutely dramatically in terms of a starting position, knowing there'll be extra charges. But if an issue arises, then we can, in terms of, major conflict, then we can work through. And I really would just sort of encourage that well, you can't claim back the costs of undertaking a 357 objection. It was put in the Act exactly for this reason, so there wasn't, extended haggling over many months and years. It was actually saying, look, if you really object, if you are not happy, there is a process in the Act to address this. So, Madam Chair, are you comfortable with, I'm happy to move the recommendation that's in the report, subject to those two changes. I don't know if the officers need greater clarity.
With those words?
Subject to changing the initial fixed charge 1 to 3 to 15 and 4 lots to 2.5. Yes, I'm comfortable with that. No other changes.
You wanted the word deposit included.
I think that's minor editorial, so if is there a clause allowing for minor editorial changes from, there isn't?
We could say with minor wording changes, including from our, we could just add an including.
So through you, Madam Chair, I'm a little bit nervous about that charge, and I think we might need some advice from the lawyers about it, because the fixed charge component is the fixed charge component under the RMA, and so there's a question if we change it to deposit, whether that means we're into a different
area. All right, so perhaps if we could insert which I'm sure we'll have on that previous report, the minor editorial changes to be
I think we can just say with minor wording, minor editorial changes, including, if we just add including, and then that allows staff to go away, and minor editorial changes before.
No, you need a mechanism for, sorry Madam Chair, you need a mechanism for who's going to approve the minor editorial changes. And I think the dog, if we go back on one of these other ones, it might be in the dog one. Is that one covered?
No, I don't think we did have it in the dog one. To be, do you want something inserted in there along the lines of editorial changes to be signed off by the chair?
Group manager normally do it. Is that all right? It's quite a standard clause we'll put on these, because inevitably there'll be something that'll. Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies for the delay in sorting that out.
If I could just add to that, Madam Chair, these reports and the SOPs were legally reviewed and wording was changed to be more in accordance with the legislation. I'm happy with that. The Mayor's moved it. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Noonan.
So the question is, I'm looking at this and it's going out to the public for consultation, so they'll give us feedback of whether we're completely up the wrong tree or not. But when I'm looking at this, how do those rates, and I can understand what the Mayor's doing, but what's the average cost in the end? Because we're talking that this is a deposit, so...
It's about 5,000.
No, that's a deposit. What's the average workout?
So, for subdivisions, so
Of 4 lots plus?
for 4 lots plus, that is in the... So there's always big outliers. So we're doing
Yeah, I know.
huge subdivisions, which is completely different costs. But the smaller subdivisions, the council costs are around the $20,000 mark in total at the end of the process. But just to get it through the resource consent process, you're looking at around about $8,000. Then the final completion costs, engineering time, inspections, all our services, that brings it up to about the 20,000.
So I'm sort of probably where we were with the 5, because that's only a part of what they're going to pay anyway. And if it's the higher amount, then as they're using the money, otherwise you're going to be going back to them so regularly, it's not funny.
Okay, so I think we're going round in circles a little bit. Mandy said that earlier. She said that she'd set the 5,000 as sort of a reasonably close to a cost, which is a low end. So she said that that's why she had set it to that 5,000. The Mayor heard that very clearly. She still is of the view that because this process could take years, that's too high a cost to bear at the start of a process. So fair enough that is, we're in the right ballpark to have had that 5,000 to begin with, but the Mayor is of the view that let's get people in the door. They know that the cost is going to be is going to be 5,000 or over end cost, but that we will start off with a fixed charge, which begins the process. So I guess if you think about people borrowing money, then, and it could take 2 years until you're completing, I think that we can look at it, we can either go with a fixed charge which is reasonably reflecting the final charge, or we can go with a fixed charge which gets people through the door and beginning the conversation.
Okay,
so Councillor Edgar...
Sorry, I haven't finished then. So I'm going to say, well, I disagree with the amendment. Well, actually, it hasn't been an amendment, because I guess you...
I've moved it, I haven't got a second yet, so...
Okay, so Glenys is going to second it. Thanks, Glenys.
So I'll speak then. So I don't support the reduction from the report, because I just think that's going to cause more staff time, a lot more communication costs, and in the end it's going to cost more anyway. So I would prefer to go out with the original. So I'll foreshadow that if this fails, then I'd be putting it back to what it was.
Okay, I had a whole lot of hands up along this side, but I didn't see what order. I think I had Judine, Rachel, then Rohan.
Thank you for that, through the chair. I don't believe, just following on from Councillor Noonan's comments, it's not going to cost us more, it's going to cost us basically what it is costing us today. So that's the same. Look, in some ways I have to say I'm reasonably agnostic on this, because this is a proposal going out for community consultation. So I would debate if I was, dyed in the wool over this, but I think I'd rather the community gave me their feedback, and I think the signal is it's going up. I think we need to make it, I think the report's probably pretty clear that we are looking at reducing our liability and the ratepayers' liability, and people will submit on that basis. And I'm probably just keen to hear the public's view on this and to let the process run. So I'm reasonably agnostic on whether we stick at the 5 or go to the 2.5. I think the debate will actually be at the, when we do the deliberations after the hearing process and after the submissions have closed, to be honest.
Okay, Councillor Sanson, then Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Thanks. Following on from Councillor Noonan, I feel similarly to Councillor Noonan, and I guess my concern if we are lowering this when we go out to community consultation, but getting very clearly from staff the message that the charge or the charges are significantly higher than what we're kind of indicating, that we are potentially being a little disingenuous by going out to the community at a an amount that's only slightly above what we're already charging when we're actually needing to be charging a higher fixed rate. So I would just be concerned about consulting on a low amount, and then after the consultation, once we've had the hearings back, we go and change it to 5,000 anyway when we've had this deliberation. I think if we're looking at needing to change it to 5,000, that's what we should be signalling to the community. I guess I also, I absolutely, everybody knows I support all opportunities we can to encourage housing, affordable housing, that kind of thing. I would question whether there are many in the community who are looking at doing a 4+ subdivision who couldn't comfortably cover the initial charge of 5,000. So, but I'm probably just go with the majority today.
Councillor O'Neill Stephens.
Thanks, Councillor Fulton. Yes, just sort of echoing both Councillor Noonan, Edgar and Sampson's points around, whilst I am fairly agnostic, it's going out for consultation. I say at consultation, if there's any potential developers, as Councillor Sampson said, who are unable to front a $5,000 deposit, which quite frankly I find unlikely, judging from the sheer amount of capital that is required beyond that. Let them come forward and tell us that at that point, instead of sort of preemptively guessing that there's many people in Nelson who are planning on doing a 4+ subdivision on a less than $5,000 budget.
I can see that there's a bit of, we haven't really reached consensus over this issue. Glenys, did you want to speak as a seconder? Yeah, sorry, I've missed seeing your
I think for me it's more a matter of perception and the signal that you're sending to the public about development and the ability to develop. Because for me, listening to everybody around the table, it was like you're going to get your $8,000 anyway. You're just, you're charging right through the resource consent process. So for me, you're sending a signal, yes, we do want development, and that communication, when people first come to the desk and talk about how much it's going to cost, you, Mandy, are going to say, well, this is the process and this is the cost, and they will be ongoing. So I personally like it low because it's the perception, it's the signal it sends. For me, anyway.
Okay, I'm going to speak briefly. Yes, I prefer it lower too. I think that when I look at the other increases, they're in the order of $200, $20, $10, so they aren't massive hikes relatively. So I do think that there's a perception issue here. I was comfortable with the higher amounts because I understood the reason why Mandy had set them there, but I think having heard the conversation today, the perception when you walk in the door and you're told this is the initial deposit you pay is an important part of feeling welcomed along the process, and so I'm comfortable with it going out at the lower rate. So I think what I'll do is I will put this and then we'll get a show of hands, and if it's lost then we will go back to the drawing board because we don't have a prior recommendation. This is not an amendment.
Foreshadowed that we'd go back to the officers' recommendations.
Okay. All right. So this is the
substantive.
This is the substantive motion.
Yeah. There's no amendment.
No, but that's fine. We can still change it. We can still. So I'm going to put this motion. All those in favour? Aye. Can I get a show of hands, please? Aye. Okay, so that's carried. And that's. Oh, is anyone against? So the motion is carried, which means we get to move on to the next item in the agenda. Phew. Thank you, that was really robust debate, thank you, or conversation.
So item 11, dog control fees, page 102.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the proposed dog control fees. It is pages 122 to 141 of your agenda. Would you like to speak to it again, please, Mandy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So dog control fees is, a higher level context for the dog control activity account. There are currently no rates going into this activity. What's happened in the past is a reserve account basically banks surpluses from some years to offset deficits in other years. That account has now been depleted, and our cost recovery rates for this activity has dropped below the required 90% in the last couple of years, this year and last year, due to a couple of larger increases that I didn't incorporate into last year's review. There is a public good element with the dog control services, with a very popular dog education program, as well as responding to inquiries and complaints that do not result in any action. So therefore it's proposed to increase fees to recover 90% of the costs and have a rate component of 10%. Many councillors have pointed out that in the table within the report there is a difference between some of the income and expenses levels, and that is because we have worked out that if we didn't have a good dog owner policy, there would be some savings in terms of costs. So the costs would be reduced by about $16,500, and then the income received from fees doesn't need to be as high because the costs are lower. The proposed registration fees, while they are a reasonable increase compared to what they are now, they are very comparable to other urban councils of similar size. So having said that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Sanson, you had a question?
Thanks very much, and thanks for explaining why that table was a little confusing. You may have already answered this with what you've just said to us, so I'm just going to... my second question, you've answered the first one. My second question is, why are contract expenses higher with the good dog policy than without? I didn't understand that either.
So through the chair, there are, I forget how many, about 300 applications to be on the Good Dog Owner scheme each year, and it takes time to process those applications, about $16,500 worth, as well as to, so that is over and on top of the normal registration time.
Okay, so that brings me to my third question. Can you just explain to me why does it take more time to process a Good Dog Owner registration than a standard registration?
So through the chair, we have to ensure that they meet the criteria of being within that Good Dog Owner category, which includes checking the history of compliance or non-compliance and making sure that they've paid all their fees on time. So
kind of doing a search of that that applicant's kind of history around that stuff. Is that okay?
Yeah,
okay,
that's correct.
That makes sense. I think that is my only questions about that. Thank you.
I've been reassured that the alarms
would go off in here. But we,
Okay, who else had a question? Does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Noonan.
It is hard to concentrate when you've got an alarm in your ear, isn't it? It occurs to me that if people call out the dog people because there's a dog that's causing problems, does the owner get charged for that?
If they're impounded.
So through the chair, if there is like a wandering dog and the officers impound the dog, then yes, there are impounding fees for the owner to collect their dog. If there is a barking dog nuisance, that takes a bit longer for officers to investigate, and yes, they can take enforcement action as required.
Because it occurs to me that while you give a discount for a good dog, shouldn't you charge more if the dog is more time and more trouble, if you like?
Yes, definitely. So the whole idea of changing the dog control policy and bylaw is to identify that we expect everyone to be good dog owners, and our officers help educate and support people be good dog owners, but our fees are set up so that if we do have to take action on dogs because of an attack or barking or seizure, if they're wandering outside their property, not controlled, then there are costs to the owner for that, yes.
Okay. And the other question I've got through the chair at 4.3, it talks about the shortfall in the reserve account, and it says that there's an accruing debt and internal loans have been raised to cover the costs. What is the dollar cost of that? How much are we down by?
So through the chair, I believe it's about 92,000. I'm just looking towards Ms. Harris, if she can recall, but I think it's 92,000.
$92,000 in the dog account, deficit.
Is deficit, yes. Is a loan raised, yes.
So when did it start going into zero, into negatives?
It was through the chair. It's only in either the last financial year or the year before that.
It hasn't taken very long, really.
Through the chair, no, because we have had cost spikes, yes, quite high increases in costs.
So if you adopt what your proposal is, at what point in time are we going to be at zero? Have you done that analysis?
So through the chair, I can't answer that exactly, but we will likely need to keep reviewing and keep increasing charges to bring that back. Yeah.
so through you, Madam Chair, Mandy, can I just get you to clarify something? The good dog owner policy changes are subject to the changes that we're going through as part of the bylaw and policy review.
Yes.
So questions for those sit under that process, don't they?
Correct.
Right. So the questions you've been asking about the good dog policy stuff is something that we're dealing with
is the subject of what we've just probably closed. Is it closed?
Correct. It's closed and it's coming back to...
So I'll ask all those questions again when we're doing, just prior to the debate and the okay, awesome. Oh, which I won't be at actually, because you and I are busy.
Mel.
Yeah, thanks. Mandy, what are the cost spikes that you've experienced? And are they everlasting? Are they...
So through the chair, there is basically overheads as well as, and the overheads are a number of things, a number of support for that activity from happening, as well as an adjustment in the contract, yes.
Do I have anyone who'd like to move this recommendation?
I'll move it.
Oh, Councillor McGurk, seconder. Gosh, you all had your hands up earlier. Okay, I will second the recommendation today on on the proposed dog control fees. Do we have any more questions, comments, feedback, debate? No? Councillor Noonan?
Madam Chair, look, I think this one is you can't win either way. Obviously, we've got an issue with the fees and the fact that it's a closed account and it's not balanced, and somehow it has to be balanced. It's interesting that we're taking this out to the community when we've just done a dog bylaw. It would have been quite nice to have them paralleled. People don't understand when they've got one dog policy that's being reviewed and then 5 minutes later there's another one. I don't know how they're going to feel about that, but I have a funny feeling we're going to hear about that because I've got a few people who are friends of mine who have dogs, so I'm sure they won't hold back in letting me know that why didn't you do it together. So it would be good if we've got things in the future that we line them up a little bit perhaps so that people can do everything in one go, although it can be confusing because you're going to end up with different debates with different queries. So look, we're sending it out, we'll get some response and we'll go from there. Thanks.
So through you, Madam Chair, I know we're in debate, but
I've actually just said Claire can answer that because it's something I raised with her already, so I think it's important to understand why this is separate.
So through you, Madam Chair, the issue had been that with the review of the dog bylaw and policy, we had a certain time period in which we had to do it because otherwise we've got no dog bylaw that we can actually operate under. So there was time constraints that are required under LGA process that we had to do. The fees and charges we were trying to align as part of the annual plan. I get the perception thing. We can put some comms around that, but there were reasons why they were at different times.
So the reason why I let Claire reply was that I had raised the same concern in my chair's meeting with her, and I do think it's unfair on dog owners to have to submit twice. But I think there is a rationale why, and it will be communicated. That will be communicated as to why. All right, I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Okay, we're going to move on to the next item in our agenda, which is item number 12, building unit fees and charges review.
So through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to introduce Mark Hunter to the councillors. This is Mark's first proper time in front of the council, and Mark has very graciously stepped into the acting building manager's role until we can recruit for a replacement.
Through the Chair, I'd just like to start with a quick introduction to the fees and charges report. The Building Control Department currently delivers a good level of service. We've just received our re-accreditation by IANZ MB after 8 months of very hard work. Statutory timeframes are being met. Inspections can be booked within 2 days lead time. There is a good level of customer services at the front counter via telephone and email communication. But we do have our challenges, which is what this fees review seeks to resolve. We are currently under-resourced in key areas. Our electronic system was causing considerable problems and extra time and cost to customers. We've returned to the Simply Electronic portal and GoGet scheduling mobile and processing software. We've faced increased costs with IANZ and internal audits, increased costs for staff, competency reviews, qualifications, increased salaries to retain staff. Our fees and charges have fallen behind most councils. You'll be aware that council only seeks to recover up to 80% of the costs from customers. How will these fees resolve and address the issues? This proposal seeks to achieve a reasonable level of user pays charges. Within our preferred option, we propose an 18% increase in fees and charges. This aligns us with the majority of other councils of what the majority of other councils are charging. We're proposing to increase the hourly charge out rate to $160. This is not the staff's salary rate. Most other councils sit between $160 to $220 an hour. This will help us to retain and recruit additional staff if required in a very competitive market. This will also help us to fulfil our government set obligations within the New Zealand Building Act 2004. We are proposing to introduce a system fee to recover the cost of the electronic portal, processing and mobile technology, and these costs being directly passed on to the end user. We're seeking to increase the insurance levy to help cover the cost of claims against council. We're proposing to increase the quality insurance levy to reflect the increased actual costs incurred through the IONS audit process, increased competency and training requirements. We returned to Simply Go Get electronic system on the 13th of February. We've already seen the benefits within processing and inspection timeframes, as well as an increase in staff morale, while retaining the same and hopefully an improved customer experience. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for a thorough introduction. I've got Councillor Edgar, the Mayor, then Councillor Courtney.
Yes, as Mark picked up, thank you. It's not the staff hourly rate, it's our charge out rate. So again, if the proposed resolutions could reflect that we need to amend the SOP to reflect that. So it is through the SOP, but also all through the attachment 1, the proposed amendments to the building unit fees. You'll see both headings and lines all through there that refer to the phrase hourly rates of staff and staff hourly rates, etc. So if we can just please amend that. Thank you.
Mayor Rachel.
Thank you through the chair. Mark, congratulations. It was a pretty tense week last week in here as to whether the INS accreditation was going to go get sorted by Friday. I'll leave it up to you and the Chief Executive and Claire as to whether you want to explain to Council what the issue was last week, what happens through an INS accreditation and what you were dealing with.
You go first.
Because I actually think the elected members might find it quite enlightening of what actually has to happen.
Through the chair. Yes, it was a very interesting week last week. We had a lot of back and forward and a few quite detailed conversations. So we were addressing our very last GNC, so general non-compliance through the audit. We had provided evidence which we believed backed up that we have addressed their concerns. However, when we sent that information away, there's a certain amount of element of scope creep within the audit. It seems to be a continual cycle of audit. So the initial GNC, general non-compliance, we addressed that, but they found other issues, other items that they believed they had concerns around. And so it just seemed to grow and grow and grow. So we had to come up with a bit of a plan around that, which we've implemented, and they've accepted that.
Just to give you a little bit more context, the general non-compliance that they had raised, which is just a small thing, was there was an advice note on the bottom of the form, Form 5, one of the forms that we do, and the advice note was populated from Alpha 1, which was the system that we had previously. So Alpha 1 has already gone through an MB and an approval process. It was a self-populated advice note, and they told us that it was not needed, inappropriate, etc. So we took it out, and as a consequence of that, they then asked a significant number of other questions which were outside the scope of the audit. So we will be raising some issues with MB at some point in time.
Thank you. To you, Madam Chair, I just want to say so well done. It is a massive job to go through the accreditation process, and for elected members who have been before, there's a fairly massive consequence if you don't get it. You can't. We have a big problem. The team can't operate in this space without the accreditation, so they've done really well. It's a big milestone every time to do it, and it's a very intense and often frustrating process when it gets down to micro levels like that. So well done. Now back to in the report, you talk about Alpha 1. We've just spoken about it. So we had Alpha 1. The big. This is going to be the best thing ever. Alpha 1's coming, and it's going to be really good. I have a feeling Alpha 1 might have been quite an expensive exercise for us to either purchase or enter into or what have you. Is there has it been fit for purpose? I mean, is there some follow-up in relation to actually, I don't know, Consumer Guarantees Act, something else?
So through you, Madam Chair, we have sought some legal advice around this, and so we won't discuss that now, but it would be sufficient to say that we, actually I'll give you some other context. Alpha One and GoGet have now both been bought by Objective. So Objective is the system that we use as part of Magic and various other bits internally. The new owners have acknowledged the issues that we have had with Alpha One. We've had various meetings with them, and they understand that when they get to a super system at some point in the future, that they need to make sure that it's fit for purpose. So they have acknowledged that with us.
I'll leave you to continue to work on that then. Thank you.
Okay, I think that it's quite late in the afternoon. It would be good to, did you have a question, Councillor Courtney?
Sorry,
I did have your name afterwards, apologies.
Oh, that's all right. My questioning was along the lines of the Mayor. Mark, what are the advantages of GoGet? And are you getting greater efficiency and you happy with the output?
Through the Chair, the biggest differences between the Alpha system and the GoGet system are Alpha's very locked down. It's a very controlled system, whereas GoGet is we can change it to suit ourselves basically. The big issue with the IONS accreditation was that everything was set, and if they raised an issue, then we had to go back to Alpha to try and get anything changed, which was a very long-winded process. Since going back to GoGet, yes, we've noticed straight away the ease of the system. The processing timeframes have come down. The inspection timeframes the time taken to do the inspections and stuff has got better. So yes, it is better.
Okay, great. Councillor Sanson, did you have a question? No. Okay. Stretching. Okay. Yes. Great to stand. So, if we don't have any more questions, do I have someone who would like to move this recommendation? Or I can. Councillor Courtney and Councillor Sanson will second it. Mayor Rachel?
I'm going to speak in support of it because I don't think I've got any other choice. But it's not the place we want to be. And I look at the changes here because again we're talking about housing affordability. It directly goes to the issues of cost, but it's around is this value for money in terms of service? And I think that what we've got is Mark's talked about the fact that he's getting things lined up in terms of the process, but and making sure that this is the customer service experience is certainly going to improve. And thank you for working your way through that. But this is an issue of actually financial controls and systems that we can't keep replicating, is that we've got to make sure that we keep track of where our costs are, that we make sure that we move our fees and charges in step, and we really every year do that, because this is a big change. If I had another way to deal with this where I could keep these ones down, I would, but there's nowhere to go now. So I just a plea back to the Chief Executive. These ones hurt. They really hurt because they hurt in terms of the incremental changes where people can absorb them and know where they are much better. There will be people in our city who at the moment will have gone out and done their budgeting for what they can afford, and the accumulation of these, I don't have a great sense of it at the moment in terms of what it might add to their building costs, but it will, and that's in my view is a far from desirable position to be in. So I'm extremely conscious of this. This isn't one where I can find any other way to sort it, because the alternative is that the general ratepayers are going to have to absorb that, and we're just going to remain out of step. So yes, with some absolute frustration and also feeling the pain, and I'll acknowledge that right now, for the people that have gone through and worked out their budgets. When you're building a house, every dollar starts to count as you're having to decide what you're going to leave out, and that's not where we want to be again. So we'll get on with it, but it's not a good place to be.
I'll just speak briefly. I do concur with the Mayor. I think that it sounds like there's opportunities to improve efficiencies, which hopefully means that even though the hourly charge out rate might be going up, the number of hours people are being charged for might into the future go down. So let's hope that we see some efficiencies happen, and that I know you're currently an under-resourced team, so if we can rebuild that up and improve our efficiencies, then that user pay system works, because people feel like they've gone through a fast and efficient process. And that I guess is what I'm hoping we can get to into the future, and I know we've had that in the past. It sounds like there's been a few hiccups recently, but we're all working towards being an efficient organisation. I'm going to put the recommendation, if there's nobody else who wants to speak. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. So even though it's quite late in the day, it would be great if we could give the staff a chance to speak to the report first and hear them outline what areas they've been working in.
So through you, Madam Chair, I'll just note a couple of things, if I can, in terms of corrections, and one comment from me before I hand over to Jo. So the first one is that in the quarterly report there's a number of references to having commenced feedback on the Nelson Plan. Apologies, this was written a wee while ago, and so I would like to record in the minutes that that it should say shortly commencing feedback on the Nelson Plan. And the other one is there's a correction on page 179 where it currently states in paragraph 4.5 that an overspend for the urban design panel due to special housing area work. What we haven't factored in is that we actually get a revenue for the urban design panel as part of the special housing area process. So can that sentence please be removed? So that I'll give you the wording on that. And finally, I just wanted to also acknowledge that Maxine Day commences employment with us on the 10th of March, which is next week, and she will be the Manager of Environmental Planning. So I personally am very much looking forward to having a planning manager.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. This report summarises the activities of the Environmental Management Group for the period October to December 2019. A couple of things we wanted to highlight in the report. The group as a whole is really excited about the work the City Development team are doing, and we're looking forward to the development of the Children's Pop-Up Park in Halifax Street. That wall is already coming down. So the City Development section of the report starts on page 184. We're also really pleased about the way the Sustainable Land Management Program is shaping up, and it's becoming more topical by the day, with increasing emphasis on erosion and sediment control and the national conversation, which we've heard a bit about today, related to planting for erosion, biodiversity and carbon credits. There's been really great engagement with the program by the community we're working with, and it's discussed briefly on page 192. It's noted in the report that there are 2 performance measures not on track and 4 that are not managed yet, and these are discussed on page 102 and 182 and 183. We wanted to highlight what's already been discussed, that in the building area, the building team's been significantly impacted by those software changes. However, we're getting some positive improvements now. And lastly, we've appreciated the opportunity to make submissions on some proposals relating to far-reaching legislation, as well as a proposal relating to the future of a local forest. And those submissions are attached to the report and have separate resolutions relating to them. Also, I just wanted to note, while I've got a chance, that you heard from Friends of the Maitai this morning about the Maitai River, and I wanted to let you know that we're going to have a work with them, get in touch with them and look at the trend data that we do hold for the Maitai River, because there is data there and it is published, but it's not always easy to pull it out. So we'll get in touch and work on that with them so that they can see what actually is happening in the river. And I also wanted to make a comment about fine sediment, that once fine sediment is in the river, it can be entrained in the river and be quite difficult to get rid of. So some of the sediment that in the river has been there a long time, and we saw that with the Christchurch earthquakes, when a lot of sediment got into the rivers in Christchurch there, they actually had to dig it out to get rid of it. So unfortunately it doesn't just flush through with one rainfall. I'm happy to take any questions, and it'll be from any of us that you choose. Yeah.
Thank you, Jo. Councillor Sanson has a question. Do you have a question?
Thank you, through the chair. I've got a couple of questions, thanks. At 5.61 on page 192, it talks about sustainable land management and the Hill Country Erosion Project. Does Nelson City Council pay for that? Is that do we contribute funds for that through the Environmental Grants Program? Is that correct?
Through the chair, most of the money that's going into those plantings is coming from MPI. Okay. We got a really big grant from the Ministry of Primary Industries, and they're mostly paying for those trees.
And are you aware, they're mostly small landholders or larger? And where I'm going with this is that with what we're kind of looking at around City Council reserves and parks and the possibility of whether they may or may not be added into the ETS, whether it's viable or not, I did wonder whether there's an opportunity here for small landholders in Nelson who couldn't, it's just not worth them joining the ETS, whether it might be an opportunity if we had let's say, supportive and maybe philanthropic landowners who might want to, for the good of the community, have Nelson City Council basically register those plantings for. I just wondered if it's something to consider.
Through the chair, the ETS is a really complicated conversation, and we've been offering some training for some of our small landowners around it. Quite a few of these, so on the whole they are lifestyle blocks rather than big farms, because that's what we have in Nelson. The plantings are happening for various different reasons, which alters the answer to your question. It depends on why the planting is happening, and in some cases these landowners have pine plantations that they're past felling, or they don't want to fell them for wood. So there's a bit of conversation about how we can help them do something with those, or do some offset planting or whatever. We are involved in one trial which relates to the planting of carbon forests in a riparian margin interspersed with native, because there's I understand that Indigenous plantings don't sequester carbon at the rate that makes them really viable as carbon stores. So the advice we've had is that if you interplant with exotics, then you can raise the value of the credits for that land. So we've got one trial happening related to that. And if that happens on a riparian margin, then it can improve the water quality at the same time, so it can be a win-win-win all round. But we're just waiting to see how that works out. We could ask some of our small landowners your question. I don't know what they would say, so we can definitely investigate that.
I mean, I think the first thing is for us to look at whether we're even going to do it, whether it's viable for us, but I'm just thinking if we end up doing it, maybe it's something for us to think further down the line. Thank you. That's great. My next question was, at some point, I would be interested to get an update on the Enviro Schools program. I know you've mentioned at 5.65 the Drains to Harbour program. So, yeah, if there's some kind of an opportunity in the future, that would be fabulous. And then I've just got one final question, which is on page 234, which I'll just go to. And it's referring to C.10. So biodiversity offsetting, is this a thing that possibly there may be an offset program around biodiversity? I just heard a conversation some months ago where it was talked about Indigenous forest having, I guess, well, it sequesters carbon at a lower rate, but actually you can often earn a premium per unit price for Indigenous forest, and that there may be coming the opportunity to have also a biodiversity premium put on the top of that, and I just wondered if that's what this refers to. And why I was asking was really around things like the Brook Waimarama Sanctuary and whether there might be an opportunity for us to earn biodiversity offsets for something which is maybe not eligible for carbon offsets. So I don't know if that's what this refers to or not. Thanks.
Through the chair. So biodiversity offsetting tends to only be used to redress residual adverse impacts after, it's really only contemplated after you, through a resource consenting process, after you've done avoid, remedy and mitigate adverse effects. Yeah, and we haven't used it very much. It is a tool in our toolbox, but mostly we try and use the rest of the hierarchy first.
Okay, so I think it's totally not what I thought it might be, but thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and through you. I really do enjoy reading the court report, and because it's, you know, the broad breadth of the activity in your particular work group, and there's some stunning work here to be done, so I think I need to acknowledge that. And it was good news about getting that last general non-compliance notice out of the way, because the question I had was, I was well aware of the accreditations is at risk, and that's a whole set of problem. Now, they're going to be back in June, and we go through this whole process again.
Through the chair, because of the outcome of the last accreditation, yes, we will be having another assessment in June. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, the conversations we're having are that hopefully will be something that we can just provide off the books rather than having to come back in. So we just got to have a conversation with them around that.
Great, yeah. Be gratified with that, because I know it's a stressful time and the work that goes into just, you know, doing the compliance. I've got a series of questions, all pretty much unrelated. Paragraph 5.14 to Ms. Gabaletti about the parking survey. When do you think we'll get the result of the analysis? When I'm thinking about, we've got our parking strategy coming up later in the year. Will that sort of data be available to be considered, or you got a rough idea of what it's telling us?
Through the chair, we will be doing an update in the councillor's newsletter shortly, so we have got the analysis back, and we have been working with the transport team, so Sue is using that information and prepping for her workshops, and particularly the parking strategy.
Thanks. And also to you, paragraph 5.12, the Upper Trafalgar Street and the work about cell in place. I think we made a sort of discussions about the upgrade of Upper Trafalgar Street and its connection with the Church Street. I'm just wondering about where we're at in terms of that connection across Selwyn Place.
So through the chair, so we're doing the light activations at the moment, and then the stage 1 permanent activations in the winter, which doesn't involve the connection across to Selwyn Place. So that will be a project that we'll look with, again, with the transport team next financial year. That will be.
Is that financial year 2021 or 21-22?
After July this year.
Yeah, 2021. Yeah. In a couple of months.
Yes, although that work will probably not take place until February. February is the time when we have to do some pedestrian counts, which will help us decide what the options are for making that connection.
Brilliant. Yeah, 5.57, the SNA, Special Natural Areas, you're identify the natural areas. I'm just wondering, is the work going on around identifying habitats? Quite often we've got, particularly with invertebrates and so forth, and insects, but mainly invertebrates, probably living in a pretty degraded sort of a habitat, but they are unique to our area. I'm just wondering what sort of work we were doing in terms of, in terms of habitats and unique invertebrates, aka, the Tahuna backbeak beetle and the green gecko and so forth.
Through the chair, you're quite right that threatened species habitat doesn't necessarily equal significant natural area. So an example is the Nelson green gecko actually tends to prefer slightly degraded habitat like regenerating manuka scrub. And so we're doing some work currently to try and identify threatened species habitat. It's particularly important for the development of biodiversity corridors, because if we know where those habitats are, we can join them up with each other. Biodiversity corridors may not necessarily be a straight line, they might be more like a network. Yeah.
Thank you, appreciate that answer. And the last one is on the water salary, 5.71. Bearing in mind this is a report back, sort of a retrospective view, but I'm just wondering, can you give me any update on where we're at with controlling or eliminating that weed?
Through the chair, yes. We have got permission from the Environmental Protection Agency to use the chemicals that we will need to control that. We have tried manual control and it hasn't worked very well. So and even with permission from the Environmental Protection Authority, we still need to put in a resource consent. So that is currently being developed now, and we're just getting an assessment of environmental effects done at the moment.
Are you able to control the spread in the meantime?
Through the chair, not very well, only manually, and we have considered running a big community program and telling everybody to get out and look in their local stream and pull any small ones out that they see, but the thought of having hundreds of people in the stream, it might actually be more harmful than the weeds.
Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to you, Joe. My questions, one of them was around this Vietnamese parsley and water celery invasion in the orphanage stream. So how much and what are you going to use the EnviroLink funding for in respect to this pest? What are you going to direct that towards?
Through the chair, EnviroLink funding is provided by MB, and there's a specific set of requirements around it. Its purpose is for knowledge transfer. Small councils are allowed to use it to access information that often larger councils or other organisations have already found out through research. And so in this case, it was used to run a workshop here to upskill people in knowledge of control of these pests, because we didn't have a very high level of knowledge here, and also to look at what work has already been done with regard to biocontrol as opposed to the use of chemicals for these weeds.
Good. Joe, also up in the Maito Reservoir, you talk about lake snow. What's happening there? Is that under control? Are you concerned about that, or?
Through the chair, it was a bit of a surprise to find that it was there. And so currently we don't know how long it's been there. But it's at pretty low levels and has not bloomed in the time that it's been there, which is why we didn't know. So we're getting some specialist, through EnviroLink again actually, we're getting some advice because there's quite a lot of information out there from some of the southern lakes where it has become a problem about what causes it to bloom. So we want to know that. And we're also trying to work out whether the population that's there has been there for a long time or whether it's relatively recent, and we want to know what's happening in the river. So we've implemented a monitoring program and we're doing a bit of research on top of that as well. So when we have some information, we'll bring it back.
Is it a rapid grower?
Through the chair, that depends on the circumstances, and that's part of what we're wondering is whether it's brand new and it just hasn't had a chance to grow, whether it's actually been ages there and the conditions in the reservoir are not such that it will proliferate. So
what are the consequences if it gets away on us?
Through the chair, there's no health consequences, and there's possibly some ecological consequences, or the reservoir isn't a very rich ecological site anyway, although there are some, there is an ecosystem there. The main consequences would potentially be for our water treatment infrastructure. And so the infrastructure team know all about this. They've been involved in the conversation all the way along, and there's quite a lot of learnings, again, from those southern lakes that can definitely be dealt with, and it won't affect the quality of the drinking water. It might just affect the way that we have to treat the drinking water before, it gets to the plant.
Thank you for that. I have a number of questions. It's whether I can find them quickly enough. I wanted to go to Lisa, I think, and ask her about the pop-up park. Now, it's going to sort of get underway, looking at 5.11 on page 184. It's going to sort of be completed mid-2020. When does our lease start with them? Has the lease started already, or?
The lease starts maybe next week, I think, actually. So
yes,
it's signed.
Yeah.
And they are actually a week behind on the demolition, but we're expecting them to make a bit of progress in
What's
next
the term of the lease? Is it?
The term is for 2 years.
Yes. Right of renewal?
There's no right of renewal.
So I was hoping you wouldn't give me that answer, because we'll be halfway through the first year of the 2 years, won't we? The first year by mid-2020.
But we have to be leasing it in order to construct the pop-up park.
I see.
Yeah.
Get the leases in place for those that want to participate in it, yeah.
We have to have the lease, we have to...
Yeah, with Rockatoo, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm with you.
So it's a pretty short construction period, really, a couple of months.
Good. All right. Yes, this is another one, Lisa. 5.19 on 185, page 185, you say there that as well as develop, yes, you go on to say one of the outcomes of the future development strategy is the development of an intensification action plan. And here's the question arising out of this. As well as developing the action plan, officers are focusing on a number of key actions required to influence and enable the intensification. What are those actions? I'm just curious to know what you consider those actions to be and what you're focusing on.
Sure, through the chair, there's 4 work streams in the intensification action plan. So a big chunk of work is the work that we're doing with the infrastructure team and setting new levels of service for reserves for intensification areas, which will flow through to our development contributions policy through the LTP. We're also working with the transport team and the water, wastewater and stormwater asset managers to make sure that the 5 priority areas for intensification are going to have adequate services capacity, and we're trying to align their renewals program with upgrade requirements to make it a most efficient process. We've also been doing some work with the property team under the perception work stream, looking to identify where council might have properties that we could leverage better housing outcomes on. The other work streams, so the other one is cost, and so that's really related to the development contributions work that we're doing. And I'm having a mind blank as to the fourth one: perception, cost, infrastructure, and regulatory. So we've been working with the Nelson Plan team to make sure that rules actually enable intensification.
What a workload.
Council,
I'll leave it there.
have you finished, Councillor Courtney? Leave it there for now. Councillor Brand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Water salary is such a great topic, isn't it? I just sort of tying in with where Brian went and then Councillor Courtney went. And I know that we've got some very proactive and supportive volunteers of the local residents who have been very mindful of the environment, especially around Orfridge and I went on my little field expedition, put my shoes on, got right in there with them, and I'll share those photos with you, Joe. So what I would like to know is, looking at the root structure and having many discussions around how to actually treat this, with the chemicals being treated, which is great. However, the root system itself and the structure of that actually blocks and then creates a build-up of the silt. So will that chemical actually break down the root structure so that, or are we looking at still having the contractors go in and physically remove that root structure as is required right now?
Through the chair, that is a great question, and I'm not 100% sure of the answer, but I think that we won't be still needing to go in there and do manual disruption to the stream. However, I will find out. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Is that all? Okay. Mayor Rachel.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, we all marked up water salary, and that, right, because we should really acknowledge wonderful Peter Winfield and his crew down there, who are just very diligently, keeping an eye on that one. So thank you, Joe, for the work you're doing there and looking at the options around an environment funding. Just coming to the another matter, which is just having a look at page 204 of the report, and this is probably one possibly for Brent, just in terms of I was just looking at the alcohol inspections column and comparing it to last year. Is there some seasonal factor in there that I'm seeing where we've got 16 as opposed to at the halfway point, as opposed to 138? Sorry, 3%. Cheers.
Yeah, I can answer that one. Through the chair, no, that is a staff vacancy we had, which is now filled. Fortunately,
Okay.
I can tell you that there was 18 inspections or something done last Friday in the CPO, so that number we would expect to catch up to last year at least.
All right, so through the chair. So in terms of alcohol harm and risk, what happens when we've got a vacancy? Does it mean that we've got, what's our expectation as a council in terms of actually making sure we're managing premises?
So through the chair, I guess it's a shared responsibility with the other agencies, with the police in particular, who also undertake inspections throughout the year. But in terms of the expectation the council has of us, environmental inspections as the contractor, we do have minimum targets which we have to achieve throughout the year, including a minimum of 2 inspections on all our high-risk premises. So, yep, we are working on that.
Okay, so just thinking about risk, so it's, what these reports are for, so that concerned me. So what I really need to be sure about is that, or get some sort of feedback around is that is a critical area, absolutely critical area, especially when I'm thinking about the focus that we've had on major events and what can be happening on licensed premises and numbers of people, and so how would we say to our community that we've adequately managed the risk around alcohol inspections and making sure that
we've got compliance, recognising it's not solely our responsibility, but we are the agency that fulfils this function.
So through you, Madam Chair, and I might get Mandy's assistance in terms of answering this. The issue with the liquor licensing is we're looking at the whole 12 months, so we need to make sure that in that 12-month period, we've done what we're required to do in terms of checks going out, etc. The bit that we're responding to that we, even when there's a vacancy, becomes a potential risk is where there's applications that come in, and they have been covered in the period where there was a vacancy. With other staff that are within EIL. Mandy, do you want to add anything else to that in terms of?
Through the chair, we are very aware of the high-risk premises. So while there was a staff vacancy and the total number of inspections is not up where it has been in the past, efforts, there's always other staff that can respond to any high-risk matters.
So following on, but this is related to inspections, right? So this is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the applications, and I noted the difference, but I went, oh, that's about halfway through, so that's okay, probably. But it's the actual inspections of going out, doing some of the work that we do where we go out and actually have a, through the city and make sure things are as they should be. Have we been doing any of that work?
So through the chair, yes, it's not like that work will fall away, it will catch up to where it should be. And as I said, there also has been acknowledgement of the high risk areas, and controlled purchase operations have still been, or just happened just recently. So
that was the word I was looking for, controlled purchase situations. I couldn't remember what it was. Thank you. Okay, so, all right. Thank you. I just think in terms of the report, given the numbers, I can read those and look at those numbers and go, that's something that I wasn't aware of. I think that's a sort of matter for feedback on quarterly reports that needs to be in the quarterly report with some commentary around it, because that is exactly what we should be looking for in these quarterly reports is, you know, where is there risk, where are we out from where we should be, and what are the causes and what are the mitigations that we're doing. So I think that's quite important. Just, I guess, on the same topic is when I go to the areas of not measured yet, and again, this concerns me, I recognise that we've got to do something about this, but what I don't have is any sense of when we're doing it, what the time frame is, and all of these matters again. These are really important. This is about public health and safety. And this is about environmental, really important stuff. So what's the program for getting this in place so that you can report back to us to know that we're meeting these really important areas?
So through the chair, there's a meeting next week. There has been some work to date through our own IT people as well as through our Magic software providers. They have sent us the results of that work, and we're going to discuss how we can implement those next week.
So I guess that just perhaps for the next Environment Committee meeting, we could just have that, and maybe reported back just to say how we're going, and and by that stage hopefully some projection about when we're going to have those measures in place in a way that or data recorded in a way we can monitor what's going on. Okay, I think that was all I had. Just again, thank you for a really comprehensive report, huge breadth of in-depth of work that's going on from all of you in just doing this. So I always find it's a really interesting report, so thank you.
Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies if you updated the committee at all while I was absent, but through the report it does talk about, and for example on page 187 under planning achievements, that the draft Nelson plan is out for engagement. Just wondering if you could actually provide an update.
I did address that at the beginning. So
okay, thank you.
I just have a quick question with regard to the inspections. in terms of saying you can catch up, you can't catch up on inspecting over the summer months, though, because I would have thought that inspections over the summer months are quite different to inspections outside of summer.
Through the chair, that's correct, but bear in mind that this report relates to inspections up until the end of December. So if it gives you any assurity, we have been working very hard over the last few months on catching up already.
So you have been inspecting over the summer?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, that's good. Thank you. That's good to know. Okay, so the gap was sort of spring?
Yes.
The gap was spring. All right, thank you. That's helpful. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you. I'm on page 182 at the bottom there. It's talking about food safety, public health. This could be following on from the Mayor's comments. Food safety, public health, alcohol licensing and so forth, pollution. And it says council's reporting systems are not currently at a level to enable results for these performances measures to be 100% verified. And it says a review of how this information can be provided to substantiate performance in future years is being undertaken. Can you explain to me how's that progressing and what does it consist of?
So through the chair, that's what I was describing before, that the meeting next week is...
Yep, okay, fine.
Yep.
I thought that might have been what you were meaning.
That's what it's all about.
Thanks.
Okay, I think that's all of the questions. I'm going to move the recommendation. Does anyone, Councillor Sampson, if you'd like to second it? Does anyone want to make a comment? Councillor McGirt?
Yep. I assume we're talking about the recommendation whole, and I commend the officers of the work they've done for the work they did in terms of the Indigenous biodiversity and the RMA review, and note your support for the Kingsland Forest, which will actually enhance probably our own backdrop along the city boundary. So I'll speak in support of that, and commend the officers for the work over the holiday period when they're doing a lot of stuff that sort of got dumped on us when no one we're all sunning themselves on the beach.
Yes. Yes, I'll just speak briefly to the Kingsland Forest. I think it's a really exciting transition for the region, and particularly around mountain bike tourism opportunities, and just, yes, when you think about the backdrop and how different it could look into the future, I think that's tremendously exciting. It's great that TDC has thought about it through this lens, so thank you for the hard work the staff did over the summer. Yes, it was great to see those submissions moving forward, moving through. I think we will put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? It's carried. And that is the end of a fairly long day. Thank you so much, everyone. Oh yes, we're going to stand for our karakia, closing karakia. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te awhai atoa tātou airaki. Ahi karakiti, te oroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, aki aki, amene. Thank you very much, everyone. Kia ora.